Ethan, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. How are
Let's
you?
do it. I'm excited.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for listeners, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Ethan Agarwal. I'm running for governor of California. I am from Canada originally. I grew up in Montreal. My dad was a professor at McGill. He started a company in the 90s and moved the family out here to a town called Los Gatos, which is about an hour south of San Francisco. And this is back when California was the obvious place that smart, ambitious people come to start companies, to raise their family. And then I went out to the East Coast. So I spent college, grad school. I worked in finance for the first 10 years of my career, consulting. And then I started two companies. One was a digital fitness company called Aaptiv. It's similar to Peloton, but without the hardware. So you pay $10 a month for access to a large content library. I grew that company to about 100 million in revenue, and then I sold it. Excuse me, I sold that in 2021. Then I started another company called the Coterie, which was a consumer fintech company. I ran that for 4.5 years, and I sold it earlier this year. And now I live in the South Bay, and I'm running for governor because I think California is a really high potential state, and I think we're not realizing our potential.
Okay. So, two companies, two exits.
Yeah.
You're a pretty successful man, and people will say, why do you want to put yourself through this misery of being a governor? Why are you doing this?
It's a good question. I've been complaining about politics and the Democratic Party and about California for a long time. And I felt like this was a put up or shut up kind of opportunity. So Gavin Newsom is termed out. I don't like any of the other candidates. And I felt like I can't just keep complaining about things if I'm not willing to stand up and do something about it.
So, what are the major complaints that you have as someone who's lived in the state for, practically a lot of your life, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, simply, we are not realizing our potential. People who live here are paying a lot of taxes and not getting much in return. And a lot of people are leaving. We've lost 500,000 people in the last 5 years, which is crazy to me. How can you leave a place like California? At the same time, I totally sympathize with them because it's extremely expensive to live here. It's really burdensome to start a small business, and it's incredibly hard to find a job. And so while I don't blame people, in my head, I'm like, this is the most amazing place in the world, and the most interesting people in the world come live here, and yet people are leaving. And those two things don't fit with each other. So I look at that as a macro perspective. And then on a more specific basis, median house price here is $900,000. I live in a town called Palo Alto. There's 75 firefighters that work for this town. Not one of them lives in Palo Alto. 3 of them live in the greater Bay Area, and the other 72 are commuting hours each day to get to their job. If a firefighter or a policeman or a teacher can't afford to live in the town that they're protecting or they're educating, something is broken. And that's where people are leaving, and I don't blame them. And so that I think about that, and in my mind, it just doesn't, those things don't reconcile. So I'm trying to solve that problem.
Okay. The reality of affordability is an issue not only in California, but it's actually widespread right now. But obviously, California is up there. So, what would be the typical policies that you can look into so that you can reduce the cost of living? Like, what would be like the typical or like the strategies that you have?
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about housing. So median house price here is $900,000. There's 3 simple reasons why. One is, do you know what CEQA is? Have you heard of this thing? Okay. So CEQA stands for the California Environmental Quality Act.
Oh, okay.
This is something that was passed in the 70s when Reagan was governor, so 50 years ago. And in the beginning, it was smart. It had some ideas around how to protect California's environment. What it's become today is an extortion tool to prevent developers from actually building anything by people who don't want things to get built. And those are usually the NIMBYs, the environmental groups, or some of the really heavy-handed unions. So I'll give you a perfect example. Up in UC Berkeley, there's a parking lot that the university wanted to convert into student housing because there's not enough housing for the students. The Sierra Club sued the university saying that this building that you want to build is going to violate CEQA, that law that I mentioned. And the judge agreed with them, so the building didn't get built. And the reason that the judge gave was that when students move in there and they're walking around and they're talking, the voices of the students will count as sound pollution. And that's a violation of CEQA. It's that kind of lunacy that is preventing housing construction from happening. So what I would do is dramatically weaken the enforcement of CEQA, which is something that the governor actually has the authority to do. Okay. So that's one. Two is I am opposed to all monopolies, especially government-sanctioned monopolies. So PG&E is a monopoly. We'll get to that in a second. But there's a lot of union construction jobs here that have now become monopolies. And there's something called the prevailing wage law, which says that any developer has to pay a certain wage to union workers or to any workers in order to get construction done. I am not anti-union. I think if a group of people want to band together and say, we're going to negotiate our salaries together, that's great. Fine, go do that. But when there's a monopoly, when the developer cannot hire other labor, or when they are forced to pay above market rates for that labor, that's where the costs become exorbitant. So you end up paying 3 or 4 times what the market rate is, and therefore the cost of a house becomes too expensive. That's why the median house costs $900,000. So what I would do is reset labor rates to be whatever the market clearing price is, as opposed to monopolistic labor rates. And then the third is we need to change our zoning laws. We have far too strict zoning laws around single-family homes versus multi-story. We need to have significant more multi-story. So the way that you solve the housing crisis is that you increase the supply of houses. It's that simple. Okay. I'll give you one more quick example. Bacon in California is about 30% more expensive than it is in Arizona. The reason for that is that our gas in California at $5 a gallon is about 40% higher than the national average, which is $3 a gallon. And there's 2 reasons for that. California has something called a low carbon emission tax. This was passed when Schwarzenegger was governor, and it basically says that California's gas has to be 30% cleaner than any other gas that's out there in the country. And as a result, our gas becomes like $1.10 more expensive per gallon. Then we have something called an excise tax. Now, a lot of places have excise taxes, but ours is a lot more expensive. So between the 2 of those, we're paying $2 a gallon more than the rest of the country. That means gas alone is more expensive, but it also means that food is more expensive. Because when you eat food, it goes from the farmer to the distribution center to the grocery store to your house. And all those miles are on a car or a truck that's running on gas or diesel that's 40% more expensive. So by the time you pay for that bacon, it's more expensive than it would be anywhere else because the cost of the gas to transport the bacon is more expensive. So yes, things are expensive nationwide, but we are particularly bad at this, and it's hurting families, and that's why people are leaving California.
Yeah. No, I agree on the gas pricing side of the situation. I did look into that, actually, Ethan, which was going to be one of my questions also. When you reduce the cost for the gas, I think that'll just definitely help the process. So besides these things, what are the other issues that you feel that you're not happy with the way how California is right now?
Yeah, the 3 biggest issues facing California are 1, energy, 2, education, and 3, housing. If we solve energy, education, and housing, a lot of our other problems like crime and homelessness, those will be solved downstream from there. So let's talk about energy. Is your utility bill just a nightmare every month? Yeah. My utility bill is a nightmare every month. I have no idea how much it's going to be. It keeps going up. There's no predictability into it. It's just, it's unbelievable how much I'm spending on utilities. And this is true for people across the state. And going back to my original point, the problem is that PG&E up here and LADWP in LA, these are basically monopolies. And so there's no incentive for them to reduce prices. In fact, the way PG&E is compensated is there's something called an investor-owned utility. So PG&E is actually a public company. You and I can buy equity in PG&E. There's a rule that says that they're not allowed to generate more than 10% profits. But the problem is that the 10% is calculated based on their CapEx spend. So they're actually incentivized to spend more on CapEx. And then what they do is, not to get too technical, but they take that CapEx spend and they pass it back on to the consumers over a 10-year period, saying, whatever money we spend on CapEx goes back to the customer. So if you think about it, the incentives are totally wrong, because here's PG&E saying, okay, I want to make as much as I can with my 10%. So I'm going to go spend a bunch of money on CapEx so that 10% of that dollar amount is as big as possible. And then this CapEx amount is going to be paid for by my customers. So there's a total disincentive of them actually trying to reduce costs for consumers. And that's why our utility bills keep going up. So the way that you solve that is you increase the supply of energy. So California's current supply of energy across the whole state is about 80 gigawatts. And we need to roughly 4x that to about 300 gigawatts over the next 5 years. And the only way that you do that is by dramatically increasing the supply using an all of the above solution. So yes, we need alternative energy like solar and wind, but we also need nuclear energy. So if you look at, there's a lot of talk about small modular reactors recently. A small modular reactor is basically a reactor that can be built effectively in a factory. And a small modular reactor can be built anywhere and then located anywhere. So that's really important. And a regular SMR can generate 200 megawatts. So you stack 10 of them, that's 10 gigawatts. That's 15% of the residential capacity of California. And if we had no political impediments, we could build 10 small modular reactors in the next 12 months if we gave a shit and we actually tried to solve this problem. And that would reduce our energy bills because suddenly we have a lot more supply, but there's just too much drama standing in front of it. So my point is, if we were to actually take an approach to say, what are we going to do to increase our capacity and reduce our energy bills? There are solutions out there. We're just standing in our own way of solving these problems. I can go deeper into it, but that's generally how I would think about the energy problem is we don't have enough supply and the incentives are wrong because of the monopolistic standard.
Okay. I do want to go to, or just move to this point real quick. So you talked about capitalism and meritocracy as, as your core beliefs, right? How do you define fair capitalism in a state where, we do have pretty decent amount of inequality?
Well, inequality, I mean, there's 1.3 million kids in California living in poverty. 1.3 million. There's 7 million children here, and roughly 18% of them live in poverty. And poverty in California is defined as $40,000 a year, which is already pretty ridiculous. But the fact that there's 1.3 million kids living in poverty when there is so much wealth in this state, to me, that should be the only question ever asked of any candidate ever. How are you solving 1.3 million kids of poverty? And if you don't have an answer to that, then what the hell are you doing running for governor? The way that you solve this problem is that you lower costs so that they can afford to buy what they need to buy, and you increase job opportunities for the parents so that they get paid more money. You have to do both. And the only way to do that, the only way to reduce costs is to increase supply. And the only way to increase compensation is to increase the amount of job opportunities that people have. Nobody else is doing this. They're just focused on maintaining the status quo. And the way that I know that is all the other candidates are just fighting for the same endorsements from the same groups and the same politicians and the same everything. And nothing is going to change in the system because the system that we have has not worked if there's 1.3 million kids living in poverty. So how do you lower prices? You lower prices by getting rid of these excise taxes and these low carbon emission fuel standards, which, for you and I, maybe $5 a gallon versus $3 a gallon isn't the end of the world. But for someone making 40 grand a year, it matters a lot. Sure. Bacon being 30% more expensive, it matters a lot to those people. And so you get rid of these ridiculous rules that we've put in place that don't benefit the government, that don't benefit anyone else, but are actually hurting working families. And then you increase the supply of jobs. Companies are leaving California. DoorDash, I'll give you a perfect example. DoorDash is a company that was started in California, 3 students at Stanford. It's now a $180 billion company. They employ thousands of people in California. They recently launched something called Dot, which is this delivery vehicle that delivers food. Yes. They wanted to build it and launch it and test it in California. And they applied for a permit. Not only did their permit not get approved, their permit did not even get reviewed by the state of California. So they went to Arizona and they built an R&D center and they built 200 six-figure jobs, blue-collar jobs, actually building this thing in Arizona, and now they're testing and launching in Arizona. Why are those jobs not in California? Elon, whatever you think of the guy, built Tesla in California. He built Gigafactory in Texas. That's 22,000 factory jobs that went to Texas and not to California. We are kicking companies out. We are sending jobs out of California.
What's the reason for California not even reviewing it? Is it like just backlogged, or is it what's
Lethargy. They don't give a shit. They don't think that companies should be creating these kinds of opportunities here. They don't care. They just don't care. They don't think it's a problem that companies are leaving. And when companies leave, jobs leave. And when jobs leave, people leave. And it's that simple. I mean, we are the home of AI, right? In theory, AI has a software component and a hardware component. And the software, okay, fine, we're doing well, but that's a bunch of like rich engineers that are doing that. There's a hardware component, which are data centers. Masa-san, who's the CEO of SoftBank, said he's investing $1 trillion into AI data centers, and all $1 trillion of that is going to Arizona, not to California, which is the home of AI. Those are blue-collar jobs. Those are factory jobs that should be in California, but they're not. So the way that you solve homelessness and the way that you solve jobs and the way that you solve poverty is by creating more job opportunities in California, not kicking out people that are creating jobs.
Okay. Question on the homeless side of things. This is a topic that to be honest with you, Ethan, I am not very optimistic about it because California has spent close to $38 billion so far.
And homelessness has gone up.
Right. How do you fix it if there's a fix to it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I've now spent quite a bit of time speaking with homeless people. And what you realize is that most of them, some of them, yes, have drug issues and substance abuse and mental issues, but a lot of them are actually folks that were renting, or maybe they even owned a place and they just fell behind on a paycheck, or they got let go and they just couldn't afford to stay. So they now live on the street. And these are like, I've talked to people that are former accountants, they're former lawyers, and they just couldn't afford to continue living in a house. So they now live on the street. So the way that you solve their problem is that you increase the supply of housing so that it's not $4,000 to rent a one bedroom, that it's actually $800 or $1,000 to rent a one bedroom. And so that people can actually afford to move back into housing. That's one. Two is, I don't know how familiar you are with this, but I've learned this recently. There is I don't know how else to put it, but a massively corrupt homeless industrial complex in San Francisco and LA at least, where I could talk about this for a while, but basically what's happening is there's these nonprofits that are formed. And the nonprofits, in theory, are designed to solve problems like homelessness or drug use or vandalism or retail theft. And the city government says, instead of the city government solving this problem directly, the city government is going to give money to these nonprofits. Now it's been billions of dollars. And then the nonprofits are tasked with going to solve the problem. The issue is that the nonprofits have realized that if they actually solve the problem, they're going to stop getting the money. So they will peacock in the sense that they'll put on a whole song and dance about them solving the problem, but they're actually not incentivized to solve the problem. They're incentivized to keep the problem going just long enough that they continue getting funds from the city. And I know this sounds outlandish to people who think that this is not real, but it's very, very real. And it's what's causing a lot of the issues in SF and LA and why these dollars are not being spent properly. I'll give you an example. In Oakland, they have a dumping problem where people, you know those signs you see on trucks that say like, we'll pick up your junk removal. So there's like the big companies that do it, and then there's the small guys that do it. And some of the smaller guys that do it, they'll pick up the junk. And then there's these like areas within Oakland where they'll go and they'll just dump the junk on the street. City of Oakland has hired some nonprofits whose job it is to go and clean these up. I think they've spent, I don't know, $1.2 million or something. And these nonprofits specifically have been seen preventing other organizations from cleaning it up. Because if they actually clean it up, then their funding is going to dry up. So there's other organizations, one's called the Urban Compassion Project. These guys are incredible. They don't take any money from the city. They are just volunteers that go out and actually clean junk up, and then they try to dispose of it. And the ones that have the money coming from the city get in their way because they realize that if this problem is solved, that they're not going to be able to get any more money from the city. I mean, it's total corruption. And I think what happens is we hear, oh, it's a nonprofit that's designed to prevent homelessness. So all of us are empathetic and all of us say, okay, that sounds great. But when you actually ask them like, hey, can you show how this money has been spent? Hey, can you show the results of what you've been spending your money on? They're completely unable to do so. And the fact, you brought up the problem perfectly. The fact that we've increased the amount of money that we've spent, but homelessness has gone up, shows you that the system's not working.
Right. No, I mean, if you visit some parts of LA and some parts of San Francisco, and you would think that $38 billion should be doing something, and it clearly isn't, right? So, okay. One question that that came to mind was, the Democratic Party in California is seen as very progressive, right? Where do you think the party has gotten it right, and where do you think it has drifted away from working and middle class voters?
Well, 40% of California voted for Donald Trump. 40%. This is while our own U.S. Senator and our own Attorney General was the one running against him. So, when the Democratic Party focuses too much on social issues, which is what happened in 24 and what's happened for the last, call it 8 years, we lose. It's that simple. And when we focus on economic issues, jobs, housing, cost of living, that's when we win. And the Democratic Party under Bill Clinton, under a couple of these other, late 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, even under Obama, to me, that was the party that I identify with. I've been a Democrat my whole life. And what the Democratic Party has done in the last 8 or 10 years under Warren and Bernie Sanders and AOC does not resonate. And even under Kamala, it does not resonate. And so I identify myself as a lost Democrat. And I think there's a lot of lost Democrats in California. And I think a lot of those 40% that voted for Trump are actually lost Democrats. They either didn't like Kamala, or I think they voted Republican for the first time because they felt alienated by the Democratic Party. So the bet that I'm making is that there's probably a very ardent, 15, 20% on the left that'll vote for the most left candidate. And then there's an ardent 15, 20% on the right that will vote for the most right candidate. But there's, 60% in the middle that are lost. And even some of the Republicans in California are willing to vote cross-party, and some of the Democrats are willing to come back to the party. And so my campaign is not designed to change minds. My campaign is designed to provide a home to people that feel alienated by both parties and that feel that common sense is gone from both parties. And so I think the Democratic Party should be the party talking about the middle class, should be the party talking about jobs and housing and infrastructure and energy costs. And that's when we do really well. It's when we focus on extreme social issues that where we prioritize them. Like as an example, I am pro-right, I am pro-choice, I am pro-LGBT, I'm pro-DEI. I just think that those issues are far lower on the list of priorities that California needs to solve. And if you disagree with me, right, if you think that DEI is the number one issue that California needs to solve, that's fine. I respect that. But then you should vote for somebody else. If you think housing and infrastructure and energy and education are the issues that California has, then you should vote for me. It's really a question of where you think the priorities are for California.
Okay. Speaking of the position that you're running for, so current Governor Newsom, obviously, most likely he's going to have a run for the presidential election in 28. Where do you think he did well, or areas that he did well, and where are the areas that he struggled that you feel needs significant improvement?
When he came into office, I had a lot of excitement and hope for him. He has a really interesting background. I mean, I know he gets a lot of flack on X for, people say he grew up rich and all this kind of stuff. And his dad was a lawyer, but he came from a really interesting background, and he had a really impressive career. And to me, he represented a lot of what California could stand for. And I think that when he became governor, he was lieutenant governor, he was mayor of SF. When he became governor, I had a lot of hope for him. And I think what I've realized about him is that I think he's wanted to be president his whole life. And I think when he became governor, he started thinking about, what do I do to most effectively run for president? And as a result of that, I think he's abandoned some of the things that he initially promised. And he's become more of just like a establishment guy. And for example, this year he's hired another. So by the way, this is amazing. The number one employer in the state of California is the state of California. It's not Apple or Google or Meta or some Hollywood studio or whatever. It's the state of California. And this is, by the way, as our population is declining, Newsom has hired more people into the state of California. I'm talking about civil service workers. Because SEIU 1000 is a big donor to his campaign and to Newsom in general. And so I think what he's ended up doing is making some very calculated decisions about where do I want to spend my time and political capital so that I set myself up best for the presidency. So I wish that he or any other candidate focuses exclusively on California. And by the way, this is an important point, is I'm coming into this office with no political allegiances because I've never been in office before. So I don't owe some congressman or some mayor or something, some favor. And after this, first of all, I wasn't born in America, so I can't run for president, but I don't want to go to the cabinet. I don't want to do anything else. So I'm not going to be in the office thinking about, oh, well, if I do this, then I'm going to piss off that person. They're not going to help me next time. I don't have any of those problems. So what I would hope is that anyone that sits in the seat of the governor of California focuses on the state of California as opposed to anything else. And I think that's one of the things that he hasn't done well. Recently, I like that he's fighting back, against Trump. I voted yes on Prop 50 because I think we should fight back. I don't think that I would have spent, I think the number is $180 million on it. I don't think it's one of the top priorities facing California, but it's on the ballot, and I think it's good to fight back. Otherwise, Trump is going to become authoritarian more so than he already is. So I like that he's fighting back from sort of a national figure, but I do wish that he spent more time focusing on just California itself.
Okay. Couple things that I wanted to talk about regarding Prop 50, where I actually saw a video of you posting after you voted, I believe. One of the things that I don't know how it works, and could you elaborate on, when someone goes to a voting poll, I know like this kind of like a weird shift into this question here. You go into a voting booth, right? And no ID is required, right? For me, see, I grew up in Nepal. I came here, like I said, 20 years ago. Even for a country like Nepal, what really happens is you get when it's general elections, you get 2 days or more of it's a national holiday. So they're encouraging people to go vote. But also we have ID laws where you have to really show the ID. Ethan, can you talk about that a little bit, where a lot of people don't understand how that works?
I agree. We need voter ID. I think it's if you don't have integrity in your elections, you don't have anything. And I know this is contrary to the Democratic Party's position, but I'm okay with that. The argument is that it's racist, that poor people and minorities don't have driver's licenses. I have not seen any data that shows that minorities have less identification than more wealthy people. And I think everybody benefits when you have voter ID. I mean, I went through the process. I gave them my name, and they had my name come up on a computer because I'm a registered voter. But at no point did they check that I am that person. And so I could have said that I'm you.
So they just take it for your word, and
they take it for my word.
Yeah.
And I think I'm not 100% sure about this, but I think that I gave them my name. My name came up on their computer. They checked it. So I think if I went somewhere else and tried to vote with my name again, it wouldn't work because it would show that
you already voted.
I've already voted. But I don't think there's anything stopping me from going and saying that I'm Tyler or going that I'm saying that I'm you and voting before you have.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just don't think there's any. If anyone says that's racist, that you're asking for like an ID, which is just an absurd idea, it just, I think the idea should be if someone doesn't have an ID, you should be helping them get an ID. That's a very
Correct.
simple fact, right? Like if you have like voters that are not able to get IDs, you need to find ways for them to get IDs. It's plain and simple, according to at least like from my thought. Okay, California, or I guess like let's talk about Los Angeles, but also other parts of LA or other parts of California as well. We have this thing called nice weather, but that comes in with a lots of traffic. How do we solve the traffic problem, Ethan? Because I've been like I was mentioning this to you. I was fortunate to travel to China. I was in Sydney. I've been to Europe, and I feel like for a wealthy country like the U.S., we don't have high speed trains or rails, which we're building. That's going to be here sometime in 2038 or 40s, whatever that is. How do we solve this problem?
So as you said, public transportation is how you solve this problem. I am actually a big proponent of high-speed rail, not only because it represents. I commute SF to LA all the time, and so do you. And making that a 30-minute trip would be amazing. So there's the logistical benefits, but I also think it's important that people feel inspired and excited and motivated by new technologies and by exciting things that feel like the future. High-speed rail feels like the future. And when you go to Shenzhen or you go to Dubai or you go to Copenhagen or you go to other places around the world, and even some other cities in America, the infrastructure that they have feels like the future. And why do we not have that in California? We are the most innovative place in the world.
Correct.
And we don't have the infrastructure. And I would like to be proud of our infrastructure. And I would like people to share videos saying, look at this maglev train that California has built that travels at 350 miles an hour and it connects SF and LA in 45 minutes. And look at the quality of the seats and everything is cool. Like, that's exciting. Like, that's, drawing a parallel, it's like the moon landing. It's like it inspires people to do other things. And we know how to do it. As society, as humans, we know how to do it because it's done in other cities around the world. And we have the brain power and the money and the land in California to do it. The only thing standing in the way is our own political stupidity. That law I was mentioning earlier, CEQA? Mm-hmm. We have spent $600 million on CEQA paperwork for high-speed rail. $600 million gone to the lawyers and the accountants and the contractor and like just nobody building anything, because that's where the incentives are, is all this environmental and frankly like political bullshit that doesn't actually get anything done. If you gave a private company $10 billion to build this in 3 years, they would get it done in 3 years. And then the government pays them, the government mandates how much you can charge, and then they can take their money back that way. That would get done much faster than if we had the way that we're doing it right now.
Right.
The way that you solve this is public transportation. Look at BART. Mm-hmm. The average BART employee, let's play a game. How much do you think the average BART employee makes? Guess.
Probably close to 40, 50, thereabouts, maybe.
Keep going.
60?
Keep going.
80?
You're not even close.
Oh, really? Okay.
Keep going.
100, 120?
Keep going.
140?
Keep going.
200?
$189,000 a year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The average BART employee. And they're asking for more. And this is when ridership is down dramatically in the last 5 years. If you're paying a train operator $189,000 a year, how are you going to build a sustainable system that scales, that adds more stations, that increases speed, that reduces costs? It's just not tenable.
Well, the counter argument to that wouldn't be, because the cost of living is pretty high. So I guess like probably 189 would be a little on the higher side, right? Compared to
a teacher makes $70,000.
Correct. So yeah, there has to be some sort of a balance to that. Okay. And the problem is, you're building. I think that they started building from Bakersfield to Merced, and that stretch I think is supposed to be in operations by what 2032 thereabouts. And then I think they have to kind of, because of some sort of change that needed to happen. I guess they're moving that to what it's going to be now Bakersfield to Gilroy, which is going to be in 2038, and it's never going to get built. Yeah, that's I'm optimistic, but it just seems like it's just way far out there. And I wish people didn't have to sit in traffic at 4 a.m. in LA. I see sometimes I have to go early mornings meetings, and 4 a.m. you wouldn't believe the amount of cars that's out there, and they're doing that because they want to beat traffic, and they want
Totally.
And it's 3 hours literally from LAX to let's say where I'm at right now in Ontario. That's 3 hours. 3 hours for 60 miles is ridiculous, and no wonder like there's road rage, and you're tired. You get out of
Yeah, and you're leaving your family at 4 in the morning
4 in-
instead of being with your kids when they wake up in the morning.
Yeah, no, I mean that is a problem. That's a major problem that California has. Okay, I know that on the tech side of things, do you feel there's a lot of regulations on the technical businesses as well?
I do. I think that. Look, I think the tech industry is doing very well. I think they will continue to succeed. I think where the real problems are with regulation are in our ability to build things. And I mean physical things, like building factories, building data centers, building housing. It's the atoms, like the actual movement and creation of physical goods, that's become too complicated in California. That's where the regulatory environment is killing us. I'll give you an example. Personally, I actually invested in a data center in Arizona, and I didn't want to do that, but there isn't any data center in California to invest in. So I invested in one in Arizona. And I know people talk a lot about water usage, and they say that data centers use a lot of water. It's actually not true. Data centers need to be cooled, and there's a lot of cooling technology that is not related to water that is now being used to cool data centers. One of those companies is based in Sonoma that's developing technology that allows you to cool a data center without using water.
Okay.
I met with the guy that's running the company. He's building a small factory up in Sonoma, and he told me that he needs to change the door on his factory from one that swings open to a rolling garage door. And it took him 6 weeks to get the permit to change his door.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who benefits from that?
Right.
I don't benefit from that. He doesn't benefit from that. You don't benefit from that. The community doesn't benefit from that. Maybe the only person that benefits from that is the bureaucrat who justifies their job by doing that job. But I'll bet you that person would much rather do something else that's much more interesting and probably pays more than be the person who takes 6 weeks to approve a rolling door versus a swinging door. And if we want to build things here like houses, and if we take 6 weeks to approve the change of one door on one factory, it's never going to happen.
So a solution to that would be like having a separate entity in itself that kind of has these checks and balances on how every department is operating, or how
Well, there's a couple options. One is you do default yes versus default no, which means that you have a finite amount of time to approve something or to reject something. And if it doesn't get rejected, then it's default approved. So, call it 3 days for a door, something like that. 2 is software. So this guy takes a couple pictures, uploads it, and says, hey, I want to change it from this to this. And the software looks at it and says, okay, this looks good, or no, it doesn't look good. You need to change X, Y, and Z. That could be an immediate reaction. These are simple things that we can do to dramatically improve the speed by which these kinds of things are approved.
Okay. I want to go into the data centers a little bit,
Sure.
Ethan, right? So obviously there's a huge amount of energy that is required to run a data center, depending upon what whether it's a colo or like hyperscalers. Obviously, California has its share of problems right now. With still, it's a hot day. We may still have rolling blackouts, and we end up getting power from like the neighboring states. So, are you optimistic about the market with or with the amount of how much the companies are investing into the AI data centers, is that, do you think, as an entrepreneur as someone who's sold a couple companies, what do you feel about the future of the data centers? Like just looking at overall infrastructure investment in terms of like energy and what are we're looking at?
Data centers provide jobs. Data centers provide energy, and data centers provide security. Yes, they consume a lot of energy. I am not opposed to actually having the companies that are building data centers provide some kind of subsidy or adjustment for the residents if the local community's data energy costs go up because of the data centers. I don't think it's totally ridiculous to have the companies pay some part of that. I do think that California needs to dramatically increase our supply of energy, as I mentioned earlier. We need to go from 80 gigawatts to 300 gigawatts in the next 5 years in general, but certainly to support additional jobs here. But building data centers is a significant effort that requires thousands of jobs, blue collar jobs, factory jobs, and then maintaining them requires a lot of jobs as well. So I think it's an important thing for us to be very good at, for California to be building these kinds of jobs here in California. Two is, not to get too technical, but the chips that go in these data centers, they're typically either CPUs or GPUs. Increasingly, they're GPUs. These are basically IP, and you want that IP to be here in California, and certainly in America, as opposed to being sent outside of California or outside of America. And if we don't create the environment so that those are built here, we risk a lot of privacy. Like a lot of our private data is sitting on these servers elsewhere, and I would rather have it in California than have it anywhere else. And third is, these are integral to just the future of development. It's important that California is at the forefront of things as opposed to being behind things, which is where we are today. So talking about small modular reactors, talking about data centers, these are getting built in Virginia, Arizona, Texas, but they're not getting built in California. Why? We are the home of AI. How are these not getting built here? We need to send that message to the world that California is still at the forefront of innovation as opposed to lagging behind it.
Yeah, first of all, the energy, the capacity has to be increased before we can start building the data centers here, because obviously that takes time, right? Okay, I want to pivot to some of the folks that you had mentioned earlier, like Bernie Sanders and AOC, and now Mamdani out in New York. So, Ethan, can you give me like a Steelman case for Mamdani out in New York? I know New York is a very complex city because you have close to 10 million people, and I was fortunate enough to live actually very close to it. I was in Long Island for like 5 years. I spent enough time to see how it's out there, right? So it's a very different place because you have a very small piece of land basically where you have over 5 boroughs. You have like 10 million people close to living there. So can you give me the Steelman case for his basically 4 points, and where do you think he may struggle?
Yeah, the Steelman case is one, the other candidates were terrible. Cuomo and Silva and Adams, we should have run a better Democrat. That's one. Two is when you promise free things in a campaign that you are not then accountable to deliver for when you become elected, it's easy, right? So people look at rising costs, which they're rising everywhere. And I lived in New York for a long time, so I know how expensive New York is. And you promise free buses and free groceries and everything. It sounds great. Of course, I would love a free bus. I would also love free groceries. You and I both know that the world doesn't work that way. But for a lot of people that are frustrated and they're sick of typical politicians like Cuomo and Adams, and a guy comes along and says, I'm going to give you things for free, that sounds great. So that's two. Three is he's an outsider. And selfishly, I think outsiders are going to win because you have even Trump in the White House. He's an outsider. He's not a politician. Daniel Lurie here in San Francisco, he's an outsider. He's not a politician. Mamdani is an outsider. Yes, he was an assemblyman, but largely he's an outsider. And I think outsiders win now over insiders. And fourth is he's a young, charismatic, good-looking brown dude who I also sympathize with. And, you know, I think people, above all, during campaigns, they want to feel like they connect with someone. And he's a guy that you can connect with. And I think that he did a much better job of connecting with people than any of the other candidates did. And I think that it's interesting. If you look at the voting blocks of who voted for him and you look at sort of the Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan breakdowns of which zip codes even voted for him, it's kind of what you would expect, which is like parts of Queens, parts of Brooklyn, parts of the Bronx voted for him. But then when you look at Manhattan and Brooklyn, it's like all the transplants that live in like Williamsburg and other communities, they voted for him. And then the people that actually like you can tell are from New York did not vote for him because they know what actually works in New York and what doesn't work in New York. Look, the guy's elected mayor of New York City. That is not an unimpressive thing. And I want him to succeed and I want that city to thrive. I hope I'm wrong about him. I hope that when he comes into office, he makes things cheaper for people. I hope that when he comes into office, cost of living in New York goes down. I hope that those things happen. I think it's going to be really, really hard for those things to actually happen.
I mean, if you really break down the four things that he really talks about is, you know, the freezing the rent part, which I don't know about, like how that's going to pan out. Free buses and, you know, the pilot program in every single borough regarding like the grocery stores. I don't think it's too radical of an idea in the sense that, okay, like as long as he's able to justify the cost for them, right? And then obviously, like, you know, these are some of the pilot programs that you're talking about, which again, it's not a radical idea. Now, the last one, which, you know, I don't have kids, but you know, you have two, and I have friends that, you know, close friends that have kids, and what he's talking about is free childcare, which actually gets a lot of people's attention because the childcare in this country, there's a huge cost to that, right?
Yeah.
So do you resonate with some of these points? And I know you were talking about this earlier, that, you know, we have to make sure that the cost comes down and also it's affordable, especially when you have kids, right? So what are your thoughts on the free childcare?
I would love free childcare. I would also love free grocery stores and free busing and free rent. I would love all those things.
Yeah.
I just think that his solution, and this is what the, you know, AOC Bernie Warren solution is to things, is to increase taxes and then use that money from the government to pay for those things. Philosophically, I am not opposed to that. I think that wealthy people who've made a lot of money should contribute the money back to the, you know, general fund, so to speak. And then people that need help should get that help. So just philosophically, I agree with that. But we've done that for the last 30, 40, 50 years. People at the top do pay most of the taxes. What we have a problem with is a spending problem. It's not a revenue problem. We are not good at spending public dollars. So until we improve the way that we spend our money, bringing more money in the door doesn't do anything. We can tax billionaires 100%, and suddenly we have everyone's money. If you had all of Jeff Bezos's money, I guarantee you we would not solve housing and homelessness and food insecurity tomorrow. I guarantee it, because some NGO or some nonprofit or some bureaucrat would take up a bunch of the money and there would be no accountability and nothing would actually be solved. Having an extra amount of money is not the problem. The problem is, how do you spend the money? Until you show me that you can spend the money better, I don't know what the point is of continually taking more money, other than it makes us all feel good to take money from billionaires. Okay, increase their taxes 1%, 2%, 5%, whatever. That's not the point. The point is we're spending the money wrong.
Okay, so one of the questions that popped up was, you're not a career politician, right? What is the biggest disadvantage do you feel you may have because of that, and what's your biggest advantage?
The biggest advantage is I don't come into this with any allegiances. I don't owe anybody anything. And that's not true for most politicians. By the time you're running for governor, you've probably done 3 or 4 other jobs. And some groups of people have gotten you to this place, and therefore you owe them, whether that's in the best interest of California or not. And I don't have any of those. I come from the private sector, and after this, I'll probably go back to the private sector. So I don't come in with any allegiances. I can do whatever I need to do for California, and if I piss some people off, it's okay. Biggest disadvantage is probably that I don't have name recognition, which I'm okay with. Everybody that does have name recognition at some point didn't have name recognition.
Mamdani is a great example. He was like 1% a year ago.
12 months ago, nobody
Right.
knew the guy's
Correct.
name,
Yeah.
and he ran an extraordinary sort of end of the campaign, get out the vote measure, and everyone learned his name, and that's great. So if name recognition is my biggest weakness, I'm okay with that. I will work through it.
Sure. Okay. Again, I have this section where I ask the audience some questions, or like ask my guests to ask question. So one of the questions came up was, was there any or give us an example of a time you changed your mind on an issue, on a big issue. Has there been a time where you were like, okay, you know what, I changed my position on this?
Yeah, actually, voter ID is one. I used to be anti-voter ID for the reasons that we talked about, which is that I thought it would harm minorities and certain groups from voting. And I looked at the data, and turns out I was wrong, and that everybody has a driver's license, and election integrity is the most important thing beyond everything else. And so I changed my mind on that, and I'm now pro voter ID.
Okay. Another question that came your way is, again, this is kind of like in a sarcastic fashion. This person just kind of mentioned this. They said, this is just another tech bro who thinks he can disrupt government without understanding people's lives. What do you say to that?
Yeah, you can call me anything. People call me, Democrats call me Republicans. Republicans call me Democrats. Some people say I'm a libertarian. Some people say I'm a tech bro. I don't, whatever. I absolutely do want to disrupt government. I think I do understand people's lives. And the way that I know that is that I talk to a lot of different people. Before we started recording, I told you I'm traveling all over the state. I'm meeting with all kinds of people. And I asked them, I actually asked them to talk more than I talk because I want to hear from them. And it's the same issues everywhere you go. Housing is too expensive. Utilities are too expensive. Groceries are too expensive. I put my kids through education. You talk to white people, black people, Hispanic people, farmers, tech people, media people, teachers, homeless people. You talk to everybody, and everybody's saying the same thing. So there's going to be some set of people that think that the social issues are more important, and that's fine. But by and large, the people I talk to are all upset about the same thing. So I feel like I do have a good pulse on the state of California.
Okay. Some progressives, again, comes from the audiences, so kind of I wrote it this way. Some progressives compare you to business-friendly Democrats. So, I can name a few. And where you'll be too friendly to corporations, are they wrong?
I don't know what too friendly to corporations means. What I will say is that we need jobs in California. If we don't have jobs, we don't have anything. And jobs are leaving, and people are leaving. So what I would focus on is bringing jobs back to California. And by the way, that's not just big companies. Small businesses in California, small businesses are probably the lifeline of California, more so than big companies. If you go to where you live close to LA, you go to Santa Monica, you go to the 3rd Street Promenade, Santa Monica Boulevard, empty storefronts everywhere. That did not happen 5 or 10 years ago. Retail for lease signs everywhere. And I talk to small business owners, or I should say potential small business owners, and you ask them why. They say, one, the permitting process is impossible. It takes forever to open something. And the second thing they say is that they know that if crime occurs, that the police aren't going to come and do anything about it, and they're not going to catch the criminal. So it's not that the store owners want the goods returned, which maybe they do, but they know that there's no disincentive to commit crime.
Correct.
So criminals are just going to go and commit crime because they know they're not going to get caught. And that's the bigger problem. So you have all these empty storefronts all over SoCal, certainly here up in San Francisco. I used to have an office in Union Square. The retail for lease signs are everywhere in Union Square because no one's opening anything. And if there's no small businesses, then the state is going to suffer dramatically. So I'm not just about big companies. I care deeply about small businesses trying to open a hair salon or a smoothie shop or whatever, and you just can't do it because it's too expensive. Those jobs need to come back to California.
Okay. Are there any political leaders that another audience question? Are there any political leaders or otherwise whose government style you admire, or is there anyone that you can think of that you have actually thought that or maybe some policies of this person and the other person?
I thought Mayor Bloomberg was an excellent mayor of New York City. I am a Democrat, but I liked Mitt Romney's campaign for presidency, and I liked his governorship. I like Bill Clinton a lot. I like Barack Obama. I thought Hillary would have made an excellent president. I think she's very, very smart, and I like the way she thinks about things. I like what Daniel Lurie is doing in San Francisco. I really like what Matt Mahan is doing here in San Jose. I think he's very, very, very sharp.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. You did touch on this, Ethan. So you talked about winning back lost Democrats, right? Which I think you sort of identify yourself as one as well. What are like the core or some of the things that you would do to bring them back? Like, what are the major?
I think it's a prioritization question. I think Democrats feel like the party has lost its path on what are the right priorities. So I'll give you an example. There's something called the Progressive Policy Institute, which is like a moderate organization, and they had a event in Las Vegas, and they invited me, and they had hired a company to do focus groups of voters to understand why we lost the 24 election. And they interviewed a bunch of people, and they were showing these videos, and the feedback, the videos they showed were voters, I think, in like Ohio and a few other states. And they were saying, one lady was saying, I remember she was like, Democrats want to give my kids the right to change their sex without parental consent. Democrats want to educate my kids about trans stuff in elementary school. Democrats are focused on making bathrooms gender neutral so that my daughter has to go to the restroom next to a man. It doesn't matter whether those are true or not. That's what people think the Democratic Party is about. And that's where we lost a lot of voters. And you can say that I agree with trans rights. I just think that trans rights and DEI and other things of those social nature are very low on the list of priorities than housing and jobs and your utility bill facing Californians. And so the way that I bring lost Democrats back to the table is say, I'm going to focus on these issues. And if you agree that those are the issues facing California, then you vote for me. And if not, then there's a lot of other candidates that will help with the other issues.
Okay. So one question, Ethan, I don't have kids, and I have spoken with my friends on this. So are there any actual rules or any sort of thing that allows these, whatever you talked about, like, let's say a kid wanted to change their sex to like, to the opposite, right? Or whatever it is. Are they like, can someone without the parents' consent can do that?
I actually don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't want that to be the thing that the Democratic Party is known for.
Right. And you hear about this, and that's where like I try to understand whether, like, and one of the problems with like social media is someone starts a small fire that just turns into this entire thing. So that's where I
yeah, it's a fair question. I honestly don't know the answer, but I don't want to spend any time focused on that.
Correct,
you know what I mean?
correct.
As a party.
Understood. Okay. Ethan, obviously you have a background in economics and political science, right?
Yeah.
And you have an MBA. So obviously there's a lot of push for four-year colleges. And I don't know how much focus we have on trades. Can you talk about, like, let's say if you were the governor and it's year 2035, and if you're designing a high school that you have this complete, like you have the designing power for, like, how would you design like the school?
Yeah, I got to say, I have two kids, and I'm probably going to regret this, but I'm not confident that I would force them to go to college, or that if they said they didn't want to go to college, that I would argue with them. Because what you can learn online and what AI is doing today and what it will do over the next 10 to 15 years changes the game. I mean, what is the two things that I've thought college helps with forever is, one, the admissions process. It's more important to say that you got into Harvard than that you graduated from Harvard. And the social aspect, which is you want to meet other people. Correct. The actual educational component of it, I mean, I think it's MIT and Stanford. I think both of MIT and Stanford's entire undergraduate course loads are available for free online. Like, I think they've published it on YouTube. So you can get the same exact education as someone that went to Stanford or MIT by just watching videos online. What you can't get is the ability to say that I got into Stanford and the ability to say that I went to school with other people who got into Stanford. So, and I don't think those things ever go away. I think it's important to socialize, especially in your, late teens and early 20s. But I do think that education needs to be focused more so on how to make it as productive as possible. Like, as an example, I was a pretty good student, but what I'm what I think I'm better at, there's kids that I went to school with that intellectually were smarter than me. And, maybe better at AP physics than I am. But I'm better at connecting with people, and I'm better at speaking, and I'm better at telling a story, and I'm better at understanding people. And those skills become more valuable later in life. They're not skills that are used in school, but I think that those are actually valuable skills. So I did a lot of debate, for example, in college and in high school. And I think it would be important I play piano, and I grew up playing piano. I love music. And I think it would be important to be able to lean on those strengths earlier and earlier in education for someone's life than wait for those skills to come later. So what I would like to see is education shift towards a more broad-based approach where people have the opportunity to explore their interests at a younger age, as opposed to sort of just like our education system largely hasn't changed for 30, 40, 50 years. And especially in California, where we're now 47th by some measures. I think if you're not incorporating AI into education significantly, you're doing a disservice to everybody, to the students, to the teachers, to the parents, to the state. Everybody is being underserved if you're not dramatically incorporating AI.
Okay. Another question, actually important question. Insurance companies, like the home insurance, obviously they have skyrocketed.
Absurd.
They've left, right? How can we fix that problem?
You know why they left? They left because in the 80s, we implemented a proposition that said that they are only allowed to increase their rates by 6.7% a year. It's capped. So they're not allowed to increase the rates that they charge homeowners by more than 6.7% a year. And they did that for like 30 years. And now they've realized that they can't make any money because the catastrophic wildfires and floods and everything are so significant that they can't charge the rates that they need to charge in order for it to make sense for them to stay here. So they're leaving. State Farm left. You can't get home insurance anymore. Correct. So people that are not in disaster-prone areas can't get home insurance, and people that are in disaster-prone areas can't get home insurance. Even though, yes, you should pay more if you're in a disaster-prone area and less in a less disaster-prone area, but nobody can get home insurance because the insurance company said, F this, I'm leaving California because we're capping how much insurance companies can charge people. So instead, we have the FAIR Plan. And the FAIR Plan is underfunded, and so now we put another $1 billion of taxpayer money into the FAIR Plan, which is also going to need more money soon. So the way that you solve this problem is that you remove the caps that insurance companies are allowed to charge anybody in order for them to operate here. Because if an insurance company is not allowed to make money, like, yes, it sounds good. Okay, you can't charge me more than 6.7% a year. Great. But if you cap the amount that they're allowed to make, they're just going to leave. And that's what happened. They just left. And so now we can't get insurance anymore. And so our biggest asset, and the one that we're going to hold for 30 years, is not insured because insurance companies are leaving.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I know we're coming towards the end of this, Ethan. I got a couple more questions from the audience. So if you weren't allowed to work in tech or politics, what would you be doing?
It's a really good question. I love music. I grew up playing the piano. I grew up playing tabla, which is Indian drums. I've been to hundreds of concerts. I would probably work in music in some capacity. I don't know what exactly, but I love music, and I would probably work in music.
Are you a rapper too?
I'm not a rapper.
Okay.
I've composed some music, but no,
Okay. All right. Maybe you could look into that.
maybe
too.
I should get into it.
Yeah,
then.
like funny story is like the mayor of Kathmandu out in Nepal. He's a civil engineer, but he was a rapper before too, and then he became like the very famous mayor. His name is Balin Shah, and same thing obviously
Same with Mamdani,
Mamdani,
yeah.
right? So that is something that you could definitely look into it. All right. Well, Ethan, can you tell us where people can find you? We're gonna put up your links and everything so people can just look at your
Sure.
your profile more. But can you just elaborate?
Yeah, my website's the easiest place. It's just EA4ca.com. So Ethan Agarwal for California, EA for ca.com. My Twitter, Instagram handles are just my name, Ethan Agarwal. And if you Google me, there's now quite a bit of stuff. So
Okay, now we'll put everything on the podcast. And again, anything else that you want to add?
no, thank you for doing this, and congrats on building this from scratch. I love people building things from 0 to 1, and you've done an impressive job.
All right, thank you, Ethan. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thank you so
All right,
much.
All right, thanks.